today is Dean Shapiro. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You nailed it.
Awesome, man. So Dean is a privacy expert and founder of Loginhood, a software for e-commerce marketers to manage privacy requirements across their campaigns. Okay, that's a big one. Prior to Loginhood, Dean built an advertising data startup from concept to exit and led the data monetization teams at Rodale and Hearst magazines. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Ivan. Pleasure, man.
Awesome. So let's start off by, let's talk about Dean a little bit. Like, how did this all begin? Like, were you always into tech and software and e-commerce? Let's go back, 20 plus years and let's hear about what young Dean was doing back then.
Yeah, man. I've always just been gravitating towards technology and entrepreneurship in general. Like I've always been kind of like that, that hustler.
Mm-hmm.
Starting businesses here and there from a young age, all the way to like college. College is when I really started getting into where I was running like a media company, a record label, and like a music festival company all at the same time. I was like, I didn't really go to class, as you could tell.
Yeah.
I'm just like
Yeah.
hustling on the side. And then yeah, so always had a real entrepreneurial flair. And then my professional life kind of got jumped right into the data world like right away in this
Mm-hmm.
like ad tech, martech world. And I right away found it fascinating. Because we're talking, I mean, like this is, years ago now, but at the time it was cutting edge. It's like, oh, you can reach in marketing and advertising any consumer on the entire internet in real time based on who they are. The concept was fascinating. So I built a software company in that space, basically a like creative studio, kind of like think of like a Photoshop type
Yeah.
of software, where advertisers can make tons of different variations of ads and then deliver them to the right user. So Ivan would see a different ad than Dean would see. And now it sounds pretty straightforward, but at the time it was pretty cutting edge. And then after that, I started working in the media space. Rodale, which produced magazines like Men's Health magazine, Women's Health, Runner's World, and then that was acquired by Hearst magazines, which is Hearst is like for those who don't know, like a media old school powerhouse. They make
Mm-hmm.
tons of newspapers, tons of magazines like Cosmo, Elle, Harper's Bazaar, Esquire. Very savvy company. And it was when I was at those two companies, Rodale and Hearst, in between those, when I started seeing this like two trends happening, I guess you could say. One was the amount of the comfortableness, like the comfortability level of data tracking was getting a little too insane. It was
Yeah.
getting a little too much. And at the same time as that, there was starting to become on the other side like this influx of regulations, both from legal and technology itself. Like for example, like this was 2018-ish, so GDPR in Europe. That's for those that don't know, like the first real modern data privacy law. That was actually a little after Apple made something even more dramatic, which is elimination of something called third-party cookies,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically how people are tracked over the internet. Apple removed those from its Safari browser. That was, I think, like late 2017. So at one side, professionally, I was seeing these companies who would basically pitch how much surveillance they were conducting. Like, hey, we know the same person
Mm-hmm.
across all devices. It's impossible for them to opt out because it's tied to, things that are really difficult for the average consumer to clear or even understand exist. And then some people are like, yeah, we're getting, like credit card information on them, so we know what they're purchasing, getting healthcare records on them, so we know what like actual diseases they suffer from. I was like, this is changing from being about showing the right person the right ad to a
Mm-hmm.
level of creepiness that no average consumer would ever be comfortable with. But at the same time as that, then we also, like I just said, you're starting to see responses to that. So what me and my co-founder started brainstorming and thinking through is how can we push forth an ecosystem where consumers are in better control of their data and the beneficiary of their data in a way that they hadn't been previously. And that's kind of where, the idea for Login was born.
Yeah. Yeah. You're so the evolution of, data and tracking and privacy, has come a long way. In fact, I think most consumers, there's a lot of consumers who are worried about their privacy, obviously, but when you think about it, going back to the days before really the internet, honestly, is most people don't even remember that they actually consent to their data being sold to third parties, because there's that form, like when you move, especially, right, and you get a new address and stuff, and then they ask you, and then that fine print says, are you okay with receiving mailers and stuff, and third party information? Most people are like, yeah, sure, I want to get magazines and stuff. And then you don't realize that I should really say no to that. But you know what? The modern version of the internet is just that. It's always in the
Exactly.
fine print, and there's technologies that run in the background that a lot of consumers are unaware of. I know we were talking about this before we hit record, that DuckDuckGo has this promotion going on right now about take back your privacy, but a lot of people are like, I think they're kind of oblivious to it and naive, because they just don't really know what happens in the background. But it's a good promotional campaign, if you ask me. To boost your exposure and get some traffic. Similar to what Ask
Exactly.
Jeeves did. In the earlier days, is that to make it like an a la carte, one stop. Like a media centric type, but like all the information that we're collecting from you. Also, people just were incoherent to that. And I think we've gotten to a point to where, with the rise of social media specifically, it's like people have started to realize like how much these social networks are actually using your personal data to be able to, well, for advertisers for one, and also for their own personal gain, to understand the habits, like what people are doing. Like you were talking about medical records, like where you live or what
Yeah,
your buying habits are, heck, even your credit card information. So
I
like,
know. Yeah.
I know a lot of people are worried about like privacy on the internet, but if you ask me, it's like, if you're on the internet, you got no privacy. You're probably
Exactly.
being tracked somewhere by something. So you took interest, into this, and one of the things that I know you mentioned is that you were an expert in FB limited data use. I'm curious to know, what is that?
Yeah, man. So actually, well, one interesting comment I wanted to mention on what you just said first
Mm-hmm.
is how these social media companies like Facebook are doing so much surveillance. What's very interesting, and this will tie nicely in, is if you're on Instagram, they've gotten so damn good at showing you something that you want to buy, right? Like everyone's experienced that. Everyone's like, man, they are really, are they listening to me? Because
Yep.
they're freakishly good at targeting. What's very interesting that I don't think many people realize, and this kind of plays into this whole privacy trend going on and its impact, but Facebook's ability to show you, or Facebook and thus Instagram, their ability to show you products and ads that are just so perfectly tailored to you. It's partially from what you do, and the data collected about you about the things you like and the things you do in Instagram and Facebook. But where even more of it's coming from
Mm-hmm.
is Facebook now essentially has their pixel, like their ability to track data on almost every single e-commerce site on the internet. The reason being is
Yeah.
they all use Facebook ads, so they want like a pixel there to help track performance and things. But with that, nearly every single e-commerce store has given Facebook the ability to collect data on their page. So when
Yeah.
I go and purchase, a pair of Allbirds, maybe Facebook's there collecting that data. Now they know Dean Shapiro has just bought a pair of Allbirds. Maybe the next time I go on Instagram, they'll send me an ad for like Bombas or like a new cool trendy sock company. It's like he bought
Yep.
shoes and he needs socks next. Like their surveillance is it's so massive, and it basically covers any shopping experience you'll have online now. That's where their power comes from. It's not just what you do on Facebook.com. It's that the fact that they are all over the internet on almost every
Yep.
site you go on now. It's crazy. But yeah, so sort of that type of stuff is the underlying cause for this Facebook limited data use thing, which is a massive problem that for whatever reason no one's really spending nearly enough time talking about. And
Hmm.
what Facebook limited data use is it's Facebook's own privacy requirement. So earlier this year in July 2020, a new privacy law in the U.S. started, the California Consumer Privacy Act, the first like real U.S. data privacy oriented law. And without getting too in the weeds on it, basically comes down to giving California residents more control over their data when they go to your website. In response to that law, Facebook essentially said, we can never be compliant. We as in Facebook, we are too massive. There's too many advertisers on our platform. There's no
Yeah.
way for us to ever govern what data is coming in. So, since we can't be compliant, you, the advertiser, the business, needs to guarantee compliance. And you need to pass Facebook these new privacy signals called limited data use that inform Facebook whether someone is opted in or opted out to receiving targeted advertising. So essentially, Facebook's passed the buck of liability to
Hmm.
the advertisers and the businesses that want to use its platform. Now the businesses have to implement these new forms of opting out and privacy control for their site visitors, or they can't, or more or less, huge chunks of users will basically disappear from campaigns, because if you don't do this correctly, Facebook's saying, we don't really want to get in trouble, so we're just going to automatically remove anyone from California from your advertising campaigns because we don't want to get sued.
Right. Right. No, that's a really good point. And actually, I was looking this up because I couldn't remember the name of it, but I recently watched The Social Dilemma, which is
That's
something
great.
that,
That's great. Yeah.
yeah, it really is. And I know you were talking about something that when you were saying that the Facebook algorithm has gotten so good to depicting your patterns as a human being. That's both good and bad. It just depends on from which angle you're looking at this, right? Because when you look at it as social is about community and engagement, friends, family, products, services, right? And if they can study your patterns and your behaviors, they know how to serve, better content to you. That's good because, holidays come around and like you're looking for stuff. It's like, oh, okay, I'll buy this, this is cool. Okay, I've bought that. Okay. But at the same time, it's like, how much information are they really getting out of me?
Yeah.
And how is it really being used for good intent? Because there's a lot of people that are really questioning that right now, the
Exactly.
intentions behind it. And I personally am one of those people that like maybe I'm a little ignorant to it because I'm like, okay, well they're getting data on me anyway. Like yeah, there's control and I can control it only so much, right? But at the end of the day, is just I'd be actually restricting myself
Yeah.
is what I'd be doing.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like damn if you do, damn if you don't. And it's almost like a catch-22 situation the way it's designed. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how marketing and social media, is really evolving. How are these, new privacy rules affecting really, digital marketing, social media channels? I want to hear your thoughts on this and, what you guys are doing, at Login specifically, to, help consumers, I guess, kind of get their privacy back, right?
Yeah.
In a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And, I'll start with that point because I think maybe purposefully, maybe not, maybe not, I don't know. But not people, but companies and lawmakers, I feel like they're really overcomplicating privacy. It goes back to, you just made a great point. Like, and here's two scenarios, right? Like, I am someone who values my privacy dramatically. I use, the Brave browser as often as possible. When I'm on
Okay.
Chrome, I use ad blockers and data blockers. Like, I don't want to be surveyed. Maybe because I know too much about what goes on behind the scenes. So I'm okay with seeing like generic ads, like whatever. I don't want my data used as often as it cannot be used. I'd rather not be used.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of the spectrum, my girlfriend, it loves getting targeted ads, and she gets ads that are very relevant to her.
Right.
She buys things via Instagram ads all the time. She's like, "Oh wow, this is perfect. Oh, this new startup maybe I didn't know about. It's aligned to my
Mm-hmm.
interest." That's a scenario where it's good. She's comfortable sharing more data. That having that optionality is really, in my opinion, what it should come down to. Like, if you don't want to share data, make it make it easy and accessible for people to opt out, share less, remove cookies, delete records, store to their email or other identifiers. Give them an easy ability to do so. Most people probably don't care. Most people are probably like, yeah, fine, I'm cool with sharing my data when needed, but
Right.
make it very easy for people to remove themselves from that process. And that's what some of the software and infrastructure that we provide are. So what we do today as a company is we provide privacy management software. And what it's able to do is, right now, per any geography's regulation, allow those site visitors, allow your customers or users to control and manage their data. And where we take it a step further to help businesses is we don't just manage the legal aspects of giving someone a mechanism to opt out per, California Consumer Privacy Act guidelines. We'll manage that, but we'll also take that information and automate it into all the platforms you use. So if you're an
Yeah.
e-commerce store, you advertise on, Facebook, maybe you use some Google ads, maybe you use Snapchat. If someone does opt out through the software we provide in e-commerce store, we'll also go in and update your Facebook campaigns to make sure that user has been removed from your Facebook campaigns. We'll also go in and remove them from Snapchat to make sure they're not going to be targeted within Snapchat. So we facilitate all of this opt out for users who choose to do so within all of the different touch points where you have the ability to use a customer's data.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to mention, I think that this has been evident, for a very long time in the marketing spaces. I think, a lot of so privacy was taken for granted because they knew that if there was control over privacy, it would impact revenue. And I think it is, even though you still can have some control over your privacy and how much information is being shared by you. Nonetheless, they're still serving ads to you.
Yeah.
So it's taken away from market potential, I guess, for a lot of companies. Because let's face it, this has been really, I think, since the beginning of the internet, really, and even before the internet. It's like, yes, you have to consent, but they try to get you to consent in a way to where it's almost inconspicuous, to where like you just don't catch it, because if you're cognizant about it, you're going to say, oh, hell no, at least most people would that are concerned. Well, in modern day, a lot of people would probably say, hell no, if it was evident and if it was very, very clear. But that's why they make it so inconspicuous, because they know that then they can't, serve you with information and ads and, sending you stuff. I mean, the reason you even receive the mailers in the mail is because you consented somewhere.
Yeah,
Also,
exactly.
and that's really where all this started, like snail mail. That's really where all this started. So they took that traditional concept and basically digitized it into the modern internet and how social media networks and how really marketing is done. But even then, when you try to control it, it's like, we'll still send you ads.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you don't want any ads? No, you don't have the option. You're still getting ads.
Dude, that's so true, man. I mean, you nailed it. That's something I love that you bring that up, because that's something I don't think many people realize. Where like
Yeah.
the beginning of selling your data started with what you just described, like selling mailing lists and stuff like that for magazine ads and things like that. You get a magazine, also next thing you know, you're getting all these other flyers from companies. You're like, how'd they get my address? That's how they're selling your mailing list.
Exactly.
It's kind of scary because it's like that. It's like that generational, both, age group and just like, like digital interaction, like that generational shift of things getting more comfortable and you get more use. So like what I mean by that is like people got used, marketers, whoever else, to selling mailing lists, right? It worked well. That became the default experience. So next thing you know, when things get more digitalized, you start selling, site data and things like that. It's like, oh yeah, of course I'm going to do that. The next thing you know, you start selling like all these real-time attributes you can stitch together about someone anywhere they are. Oh, and then all of a sudden you start bringing on other data from like their credit card information or like their health records, like we described. Like, it's just, you get too comfortable with something. It's like I think it's called, if this isn't like psychology, I believe, I think it's called the boiling frog theory, where like if back in the 90s, if you were to go and tell anyone, hey, you're going to be surveyed 24/7 across all your devices by, billion-dollar, enterprises, they'd be like, hell no. But you start getting more comfortable with getting a mailer that you're not used to. And then it just expedites and grows from there. And that's why I care so much about where privacy is headed now. Because if we don't do something about it, you get too comfortable. And then next thing you know, even more dramatic surveillance tactics will continue because you're fine giving up all your information anyway. It's used to it. What's next?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point too. Is control. I think a lot of consumers want to have more control, and a lot more consumers are actually starting to become more cognizant about control and what it means and how it impacts them. So I think it's education. For me, is I'm someone who's been a victim of identity theft 5 times that I'm aware of.
Wow.
And he has done a lot of crazy things. Has flipped my credit report upside down. He hasn't done anything like, drain my bank account or anything like that. He hasn't gotten that excessive. But I guess my approach to that is just that after going through something like that, and a couple of them were actually due to like major insurance providers that had data breaches, basically, and personal information was leaked out there. And then, you go out on like, Experian or something or TransUnion and you say, oh yeah, your info's been sold on the dark web, but they don't tell you by who. And then, you get a letter in the mail that says, I think it was Blue Cross Blue Shield years ago, was one of the first ones that I was a victim of. So someone had infiltrated their database, basically stole personal information about 1.5 million customers, I believe, which is like a huge number, And so you get this letter in the snail mail that says, well, we are truly sorry that your personal information was leaked, and we'd like to offer you complimentary credit monitoring. I'm like, fuck you. Literally, like that's my response. Is like, did you literally send me that and expect me to read it and think that there's some logic in this? And so I went through a couple of these, Blue Cross Blue Shield was one. I'm trying to remember another one. And then there were a couple other companies. And so I guess the way I see it is like, if the inevitable is meant to happen, it's probably going to happen. But I think that having control is important. And if you have more control to where, you can sort of like churn off certain areas, like you said, from an ad standpoint. And I think it's also the generational shift. You made a very valid point, and I believe in that. I know the younger generation, I'm technically, I guess, an upper end millennial at this point. But some of the younger generation now, what is it? Gen Z, I think, is the next one. Mm-hmm. Gen Z, they're really concerned about privacy. They're really concerned about, because the way they grew up, I think, it's just a whole different generation. And I think even my own kids are probably going to be concerned with that, even though they're, one's 4, one's 2, and they're both hooked to YouTube Kids. That's another thing. Believe it or not, is that watching YouTube Kids, you don't think they study their patterns in the videos they watch? Hell yeah, they do.
Oh, 100%.
That's literally absolutely the entire algo behind it. So, like, it's almost inevitable when you think about it. I mean, you're on the internet, you're being tracked from point A to point B to point C to point D, all the way down to point Z, wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, And even when you think about it, it's even with hardware, you're still sending anonymous data.
Yeah.
That's being used. So like, I think privacy is a really, really big issue. And I think the education behind it is something that more and more consumers need to have, because I think it's probably going to get even worse because companies, as you know, constantly are striving to figure out how can I infiltrate and penetrate to capture the attention of consumers, because that's really the struggle right now. I know when I talk digital with clients and like Facebook ads or Google ads or, Instagram ads, Twitter ads, TikTok ads, it's like how can you reach them on mobile? But even then, I think maybe the next step, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is this, what do you think, and how, what do you see coming down the pike when it comes to privacy control on mobile? Because mobile is really the platform where everybody's at.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I know it, that's a fascinating one, because there's kind of like this there's this turf war kind of brewing. The reason I'm laughing is you said something funny. They were like, like hardware. You're being surveyed there too.
Yep.
One of the companies we joke about all the time at Login Hood is Apple, because they coined themselves as like the privacy company. And we're like, no, like you literally got caught having Siri constantly monitoring conversations. You just don't license that data to other companies, but you use it internally for your own,
Yeah.
your own development all the time.
Right.
So Apple's doing something really interesting, and both Android and iOS, Apple phones and other operators, they have or historically have had this thing on your. No one knows about this one either. Right? Like no normal consumer knows about this. But there's this little device identifier on your phone. It's literally called like an advertising ID, basically.
Yeah.
Specifically, it's called IDFA for for Apple, and MAID for Android phones. And it was like, it's like this identifier that lets advertisers know this is your specific phone. Like, this is Dean's phone, kind of like a cookie for the browser.
Yeah.
Like cookies are in browsers. These mobile device identifiers are how you could be recognized across your different apps. So if Walmart or someone wanted to target me,
Yeah.
when I'm on whatever the different apps I use, they can know it's me. The ability to track you across your phone, basically. Apple, a new iOS update, is essentially mostly getting rid of that, or they're kind of in flux right now. They initially said they're going to get rid of it, and they walked it back a little bit. But it seems like they're going to either get rid of it or make it very apparent and very like opt in. So if you want to use it, or you go into an app that has or wants to use your like unique identifier, it's going to say like, hey, this phone or this app, wants to collect all these different categories of information about you. And you have to literally grant the permission to do so. So that, I think because Apple is no advertising business. They don't care about advertisers. They care about themselves, but not advertisers. So they're not afraid to really throw a wrench in mobile marketing. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this battle between the other tech platforms that do care about advertising, like Google, balance out Apple's, very like laissez-faire attitude towards data tracking. Like, they don't care. Like, yeah, whatever, we'll get rid of your entire infrastructure. That's what Apple's like opinion is. They don't really care. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the tech companies kind of battle it out.
No, since we're speaking about privacy, obviously, is this whether it's mobile, whether it's desktop, whether it's tablet, even, because these are essentially the three platforms that the consumers engage on, whatever it is that you're doing. Even watching your Roku, through your smartphone, like, that's ultimately where consumers are. But upwards to probably 80% of consumers are now on mobile, and so simply because of accessibility and convenience, holding your smartphone in your hand, you can do almost everything I can do on this MacBook Pro that I have, that we're talking through right now, even video on it. But the thing of it is, it seems like the privacy control is so limited or practically non-existent on mobile. It makes you wonder, like, has that been done intentionally by like Apple and by Google specifically? Because those are, so obviously Android and Apple, so iOS and Android, to be more specific, right, for the platforms. Or has it been done, is it unintentional or is it intentional? And how many laws is it breaking when it comes to privacy laws? Because there's a shit ton that I can think of, when you open up an app, right? So what info is that app collecting? Or is your phone listening to you? Like, that was the whole controversy, like, here not too long ago, to where a lot of people were like, and honestly, there's been, I'll tell you something really, really freakish that I can't explain, that just happened actually last 3 days ago. So I was in the car with a client. I told you this. I was on a business trip, and we were talking about a couple of our brothers in Arte, which is an organization led by Andy Frisella and Ed Milet. And we're talking about one particular guy. We're just having a verbal conversation in the car, okay, just to paint the picture. And he was talking about like some cookie business that one of these guys owns. He's been a third-time millionaire and he's lost it twice in a row. So we're just having a
Oh,
discussion about it. And he said the name of this cookie place. He said he owns a bunch of these cookie places. Dude, I shit you not. I open Instagram the next morning and I see an ad from that company on Instagram.
crazy, insane,
I'm
right?
like, what like, mind you, I took zero action on my phone. Zero action. It's called Crumble Cookies, I think is the name of it.
Yeah, I'm
And
gonna get an ad too.
they're like really popular, and one of these guys like owns it, right? That's in Arte, and but we were having a verbal conversation about this. Mind you, like my phone was like in a cup holder and we're just talking as he was driving down the freeway. And like,
Crazy.
here's what's fascinating about that. It's like, okay, how did Instagram know to serve me an ad for Crumble Cookies?
Yeah, exactly.
Like it
I
makes you wonder.
I absolutely think they're listening to you. I don't have information on how specifically. My thought is when you take like an Instagram story or something, you give them microphone access. So my
Yeah.
thought is that's passively happening even when you're not on Instagram, so they're able to hear some things you say and use that to deliver ads. I mean, it's getting freakish. Like everyone says that, right? That's the old joke. Like, is my phone listening to
Here's
me?
here's a wild theory, and this is probably very true, but it seems very theoretical. I agree with you. The microphone is on, and there's a voice transcription service that uses AI that depicts keywords, very much like an algorithm. So over the last 26 years, the majority of what I've done is search. Basically, is my background, and so like search marketing and SEO and understanding how algorithms work, basically. And I would almost wholeheartedly believe that that's what's happening here. Is literally is even though like my phone right now is well nothing's happening. It's on silent because I don't want it beeping. But I'm almost certain that someone is eavesdropping right now through my phone and everything that's going on in this conversation. And maybe even if it's off, I would still even say that it's probably broadcasting a signal to where it's looking at voice recognition, which we know it's nothing new. I mean, I can go and do voice recognition on Google Docs, and I do it all the time when I'm like, writing a doc, but I don't actually want to write it. I want to talk it out because
Mm-hmm.
I'm just too fucking lazy to do that, and I talk it out. But think about this: is obviously voice recognition, exists. AI exists. And what if all these technologies weren't new? But like social platforms, like after I watched the Social Dilemma movie, like this is where a lot of this really started coming into perspective. And I'm like, it might not be considered spying, but it's definitely a data breach. It's a privacy
Yeah.
breach for sure, because it's a privacy breach because you're not giving consent,
Yeah.
and you have to give consent
Yeah.
because it's done unwillingly against your will. You're not
Yeah.
given approval to eavesdrop on my conversation. How did you know about Crumble Cookies? I didn't do anything on my phone. I didn't.
Exactly.
And with online, as you know, traditionally everything was based on action, right? You got to tap something, you got to click something, right, to track that activity. It's got to be an action, right? So they call to action in marketing. Usually, is to get the consumer,
Mm-hmm.
to click on something. That's where that language comes from, basically, right? So, like, it makes you wonder. In theory, I know it sounds such a long shot. It really does, but it isn't. I don't think, because think about this: is Google is now technically the largest data company in the world. They've got more servers than anybody
Yeah.
out there, right? So is Apple. So is Facebook. In fact, what's really actually interesting that I meant to share with you that I just learned on the business trip that really kind of goes hand in hand with privacy, and this is going to open up a whole new jar of issues, I think, is so Facebook is now actually going around the United States and opening up these independent data centers, basically because they want to get more control over the data, and that's the only way to do it, by basically building your own cloud, if you would, the way the Google Cloud basically works, right? But now Facebook is building their own, right? Now that's good and bad, obviously. The reason I learned this is because one of my other clients actually has technology that provides the the HVAC component of it. So like the heating and cooling, because data centers get so hot, it's
Yeah.
just a lot of basically servers, and it's got to be very well ventilated also. But what I'm trying to tell is like, Facebook is building out these private data centers that like nobody really knows about and don't want them to know about, because what they're trying to do is they get a better sense to capture more data on consumers. And that's where, of course, as the Oculus, when that came about, and like really Facebook diversifying, than just being a social platform, because they know that if we do diversify, we capture more information on consumers, we can become a much, much bigger entity. That's ultimately what Google did, literally.
Yeah,
I mean, Google started out as a search engine, but Google is not a search engine.
Yeah.
Google is a technology company. They are, they own devices. They own robotics companies. They do space related stuff. I mean, they do so much shit that unless you've been to the Googleplex, most people are like, okay, I thought Google was just really a search engine, but maybe even a media company, believe it or not. I mean, because they own YouTube, which is the largest acquisition I believe they've had to date. So technically they are a media company, but I think Facebook is kind of following in that. And by capturing more consumer information, by building out these data centers, is that they can capture more information. They can distill the information quicker also and utilize it to their own benefit, basically. And by getting more hyper-focused on like, how can we attract consumers better? And I'll give you an example. So this actually happened over the last couple of weeks that it was kind of surprising, but it wasn't. I had a couple of people that friend requested me on Facebook, and one was actually verified on Facebook. So, which, by the way, speaking of verified people, I know I used to think this was theoretical, but I know it's true because several people that are verified have told me this, is that so when you become verified on Facebook, when you become verified on Instagram, when you become verified on Twitter, you actually get kind of dumped into a different bucket, believe it or not. Meaning that you get dumped into the bucket to where it's like, I'm the celebrity, everybody come to me, basically, bucket, right? It's true. It's true. The engagement and the amount of spam literally goes down to almost zero. When you're a regular user, and that's in part that comes with the blue check mark. Well, anyway, receiving a friend request, of course, I'm that kind of guy that's really engaging and friendly. I'm like message on Messenger. I'm like, hey, thanks, for the friend request. So, how did you find me? Do we have some mutual friends or something? And then like a day goes by and the guy's like, no, I didn't send you a friend request. Like, really? Are you sure? Because I mean, you had to click add friend or friend request, right? And so I think what Facebook is doing on the background, because he wasn't the only one, there's been a few, is like they're automating these friend requests on the background by trying to gauge your activity, basically, and community engagement on the social platform, because what they're trying to do is refine the customer base, basically, and perhaps, remove some of these fake accounts. And there's a lot of them on Facebook specifically because they had to boost their numbers. And to the average consumer, it's like, I didn't send a friend request, but then they usually be like, oh, he's verified. So he sent me a friend request. Oh, I'll be friends with him, even though we have absolutely nothing in common, no common interest, no nothing. So like, that's where like privacy really comes into play. It's like, okay, he didn't friend request me. Okay. So what's the only other alternative? It had to be automated, right? Why was it automated? Right? Because Facebook is doing something and Facebook is testing something. I even had several people that had their posts censored. In fact, one of my employees, she posted a post about, COVID, which, COVID is like, so censored right now, especially all over Facebook. And her post got removed and she got banned for 30 days. And it wasn't anything. She was basically exposing a story where a family member of someone had passed away from COVID, and they caught something in it, and they literally banned the post and banned her for 30 days. And she can't post on Facebook. So, like, there's so many unknowns, honestly, I think that makes you wonder from, like, a privacy standpoint, like, how much does really Facebook, or how much does Instagram, or how much does Twitter, or how much does, Snapchat, or of course TikTok was the huge issue, right? Because, well, they're China based, and they are and they aren't now, because they have, a US HQ, and they're technically the number one social platform now. But you know how many privacy issues there is on
Oh
TikTok?
yeah, so many. We run a blog at Login too. We've been ongoingly documenting every scandal along the way with TikTok because there are tons of them, tons of them.
Yeah, I feel like with social media specifically, a lot of people are sacrificing their integrity for likability, or for acceptance, or for belonging.
Yeah,
And when, like, you know, these social platforms are serving ads, on products and services, or they're receiving random friend requests, like, people almost feel like it's an emotional thing, you
yeah,
know, because when you really spark emotion, and social networks have really figured this out, and it's also in modern marketing too. When you can spark emotion, and the reason I'm mentioning this is because this is something that we do is emotional engagement, because that's in essence where I think modern marketing and modern social is to basically entice people on an emotional level, because that's why they buy, that's why they
yeah,
take action. you know
definitely.
uh very simple example is, let's say you see an ad for the latest Air Jordans on Instagram or something, right? And you're a huge, shoe fanatic, right? But these things cost 150 $200. You're still going to buy them because you're a shoe fanatic, right? Forget about how they even found the ad or served it to you. People don't care about that. So, like, that's where I feel like integrity is being sacrificed for acceptance and belonging, being part of a community. And I think it's the human factor that people, that's literally the rise of social.
Yeah,
Literally, the rise of social has been emotional engagement. And where these social networks came in, it's like, how can we so you've seen the movie The Social Dilemma, right? There was one part in there where it was like middle of the movie, I think, where like the guy was talking to this girl, and then
yeah, I remember
the three guys in
that.
the background being the Facebook, I think it was, like, okay, they were starting the triggers, the emotional triggers, basically. And honestly, it's actually very, very logical when you think about it. And I think that that's what these social platforms and where modern marketing has really come to is on emotional points,
Yeah,
emotional
for sure.
triggers. You hit those emotional triggers, people will sacrifice anything as long as it hits them emotionally. Believe it or not, I know it seems chaotic. People will give away their personal information because of it. They're like, here,
Exactly.
take
Yeah.
my money. Like, I saw a post yesterday on Facebook, and I'm a car fanatic too, and this guy posted an article from was it Car and Driver or something about the new Honda Civic. And I'm a huge Audi fanatic, right? So the 2021 Honda Civic actually looks very much like the Audi A3. And I posted a picture of it on there, but his post said, "Take my money." I'm like, you do realize that this is there's no technological innovation in this. It's just you are attached to it emotionally. And that's why
Yep.
you're saying take my money. But that's what consumers are doing nowadays. And they're
Yeah.
sacrificing their private information. They're sacrificing their financials, even for emotions. In fact, in the real estate space, this has been done for decades, even centuries, when you think about it. When you buy a house, right? Is you're gonna buy a house because of the memories you're gonna make, right? Or the experiences that are gonna happen. They really hit you with that. So they're like,
Definitely.
okay,
Yeah.
well, maybe you really have a budget for $250,000 house, but they're gonna sell you a $300,000 house.
Exactly. The emotion, it drives the decision making. 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
100%. And
They did a really great job in the social dilemma of like personifying that. I really liked how they had like the people in the laboratory, like, all right, send him something that's gonna. Well, it's actually
yep,
that it brings up a point you made earlier, like in that they're like, all right, send him a friend request from his crush. They'll get him back on Facebook. But they
yep,
do. Facebook is suffering from engagement rate issues, like Facebook.com, not Instagram. Instagram kills it still, but Facebook.com is. So it's not surprising that you got like a random friend request
yep.
from someone you didn't even know, because that could be a great way of increasing engagement, right? Getting more friend requests, and then you message the person, like you said, you started a conversation. And they're not afraid to, guinea pig, make you a guinea pig. They do that all the time. They've gotten caught doing that before. So it's not surprising, man. But yeah, exactly. If they could find ways to keep you emotionally tied, like any other industry, there's success in that.
Well, that's really where, that's one of the things that I've personally focused on is the emotional engagement, because, that's part of actually the slogan for my business is that, we help brands and entrepreneurs build their digital footprint using multi-channel marketing, emotional engagement, and community cultivation. Because when you think about it, the basis really is just that whether it's social, whether it's, digital or anything really, even just in life, is just that emotion drives everything.
Yeah.
Emotion is, like you said, emotion drives decisions, and so I think with privacy specifically is this, I think a lot of these social giants are also using that to their advantage, because they know that, like in the social dilemma, the guy and the girl, right? Like then you're like, okay, he likes her, okay, like serve him up this, and like, but that's what the algorithms are designed to do. And that's why these algorithms are constantly improving. Like you said, they've gotten, like Instagram has gotten so good at like knowing what to serve you at the right time. So like right now, Black Friday kicked off earlier than ever, of course. And so I get it, this pandemic, and, a lot of retailers and businesses are struggling. So they're trying to make up, and try to get more revenue. So like most people are like, what the hell? Black Friday started early, but there's a lot of people are like, I don't care. I want to get Black Friday ads. I'll go spend some money, right? Because if you want a new TV or whatever, like, I'm going to buy a new TV. I feel like I'm getting a Black Friday deal. Well, you really are not. It's just they figured out how to emotionally engage with you, and you just couldn't say no, basically.
You don't want to miss that deal. Exactly. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so let me ask you this. I know you talked a little bit about Login and the platform, and do you specifically focus on like just the web, or specific e-commerce stores, or can you maybe talk a little bit about like how does it work, or is it more B2B focused, more B2C focused?
Yeah, we do we do a little of everything. We have like a Chrome extension that's similar to like a Ghost 3 type product where users can better control their data, better protect their data. That's free to use. That's to help consumers manage their own privacy better. Mm-hmm. But our main business is the B2B aspect, where we manage, like I said before, every single privacy law and compatibility with that for every single channel, Snapchat, Facebook, Google, like basically making sure that you as a business owner are using compliantly sourced data within those channels, basically making sure you're up to compliance standards with Facebook's own privacy restrictions. Like I said before, they're saying, hey, Facebook's saying we don't want to deal with privacy, so you have to, making sure that you are privacy compliant for Facebook, for Google, for right. Snapchat. Now, we are technically sector agnostic, but where this has manifested itself the most, the sector that's feeling the biggest pain from this is e-commerce, because they rely on these channels the most. Right. So when Facebook says something like, hey, if you don't meet CCPA, California's privacy law standards, we're going to remove users in the biggest US state from your campaigns, e-commerce suffers the most when that happens. So that's why we kind of specifically focus on these pain points and managing these new privacy requirements for e-commerce companies.
Yeah, no, I think that's great what you guys are doing, and the Chrome extension, which is something that I have to definitely caption, because that, like I said, I think the younger generation specifically, the older generation, like my parents, for instance, it's like they actually like seeing ads. I mean, I like seeing ads, unless it's like something that's really infiltrating, that's like irrelevant, or I think a lot of these social platforms and e-commerce sites have even gotten so good at like knowing the timing too.
Yeah,
it almost seems like the day, the time, how long you were on the site, and you got to imagine, like, because I'm a Google Analytics fiend, like I look at a lot of data and study customer journey. Obviously, that helps depict, trends and patterns. And like, I come to think, I'm like, okay, well, like if all these sites and social networks, can can capture so much information about me, but I can't do it on Google Analytics, or I can't do it really on any other analytical tool, even on the paid ones. I can get as close. So like, why is it that these social networks can capture so much about me, but I can't capture, even a third of that information about, let's say, a client's customer base, right? To know more about the customer journey. Is it a matter of laws? Is it a matter of compliance? Is it a matter of restrictions? Like, it makes you wonder, is it something that, Facebook or Instagram or, even TikTok has done from a proprietary standpoint that's unavailable to marketers? Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I guess what the difference is, something like Google Analytics, they'll give you, great data on your own site or your client's sites. Mm-hmm. They're not giving you data on every single person on Google or every single site that Google Analytics is on. You know what I mean? Right. If Facebook, they'll you get page analytics, whatever. They're not going to give you data on your competitors, but Facebook has it. Facebook has that data. Facebook has data on all your competitors and you and every other sector and everyone who has a Facebook pixel on their site. So they use that data in aggregation. And that's how they, like, the sample size is ginormous, which is how they're able to deliver things so perfectly, because they have, tons and tons of users at their disposal constantly. So there's power in scale.
There really is. I think, well, the word power, actually, I wanted to elaborate upon that, is because I think data is power now. The more data you have on consumers, these companies, obviously you guys, because you collect a lot of data too. I think data is power, but it can be power from a decision-making standpoint. Only if this is where I think data analysts specifically are going to be on the uprise, honestly. Mm-hmm. Anyone that can basically take huge amounts of data from sources and being able to distill them and flush them and clean them to understand emerging trends and patterns. Obviously, that's what Facebook has done for quite a while. In fact, they probably have a plethora of data analysts that just do that. They just look at huge chunks of data, to determine what consumers are doing. And we talked about this, but Facebook kind of boasts this. We have over 2 billion users and this and that, and most people don't know that half of those users are fake.
Yeah. You mentioned that beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah, only half of those are fake. So now you have a social network that has a little over 1 billion users. So it makes you wonder, like, what else are they doing if they're lying about their customer base?
Yeah, exactly. Right? Like, you never know what's going on behind the scenes. Sorry, I'm just plugging my laptop back in.
So, this was a really great discussion. I mean, you mentioned so much about privacy, and we could probably go on and on about this because I'm sure there's so much more, to talk about. But, in closing, let's tell everybody, how can they find you? How they connect with you, with Login Hood, if they want to find out more about controlling their own privacy and just privacy rules, privacy information, throw out some handles, some websites. How can they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, we could do this for hours probably, right? We could just rip about this stuff all day and all night. But in the interest of keeping it shorter, I guess, if any of your listeners want to learn more, either from the marketing side about how privacy might impact, the future of their business, or the consumers listening who want to know how to better manage their data, we produce a lot of educational documents at Loginhood. It's LOGINHOOD.io. I encourage people to go check it out. And if they want to reach out to me personally, they can do so on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Dean Shaps. We also have a Loginhood Twitter, if you find that as well. Me or my team is usually messaging people via that as well. And then they can find me on LinkedIn, Dean Shapiro. More than happy to always explain some of these things that are happening under the hood, both from these privacy laws and how data collection works across the internet.
Awesome. And thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your time.
Excellent conversation.